Good morning, everyone. I am Martino Trevisan, and I'm going to present the paper called Measuring the Performance of iCloud Private Relay. Let me give a brief introduction about this paper. We are talking about privacy and the web, and we all know that on the beginning of the internet, everything was almost real in the network. This poses some issues to security and privacy. For security, for example, because your passwords, your credentials, your credit card numbers pass in clear in the network, and an eavesdropper can get them. And also for privacy, because an eavesdropper can observe your traffic, the websites you visit, and so also understand your interests and build profiles on you. Thus, since 15 years, we observe a trend towards encryption, and more new protocols are encrypted or encrypt some fields to avoid interception by the network. Let's see a bit of history. When we had HTTP 1 in clear, everything was in clear, so the URL in clear, and also clearly the IP header with server and client IP addresses in clear because it's used by routers to route packets. Then we had TLS, and with the TLS, the HTTP payload is encrypted, while the TLS header still has the domain name in clear in the server name indication field in the client hello messages. So the website is still available to the network, and IP address are in clear. Now we have HTTP 3 with QUIC and TLS 1.3. And we have HTTP payload encrypted, and then also domain name encrypted using the so-called encrypted clientello extension of TLS, which was recently standardized. There is still in clear the IP header with client and server IP addresses. This can be an issue if you really care about your privacy, because watching the addresses, for example, your ISP can know the servers you access and potentially link them to the website you access. And also the website can track your client IP to accumulate knowledge on you and potentially to find your identity. So the classical solution for people who care about privacy has been virtual private networks. They are there since the 90s. IPsec was standardized in 1995, and also Tor, the Union Router, is a very popular solution and is there since the mid-90s. In this way, using a VPN, your ISP cannot understand which website are you visiting, cannot get the server IP address, and the website cannot get the real client IP address of the visitor. Now we have the Apple way of a virtual private network, which is called Private Relay. Private Relay is a service by Apple, launched in 2021, and already included in all the paid cloud plans. It is a VPN-like service, and it is integrated in all operating systems by Apple, so in macOS and iOS. It is really easy to use because it is integrated in the US, and the user just has to enable a button. So this may be interesting to study because it's novel, but can be widely deployed in the near future because it has low entry barrier, it is easy to use. Almost 25% of the smartphones are iPhones. And this can have implication on the global internet traffic mixture, as this recent paper in IMC says. We foresee a possible tectonic traffic shift in the internet traffic mixture. Private Relay is also interesting to study because it already has a large infrastructure that Apple deployed with the help of Akamai, Cloudflare, and Fastly. The same IMC paper states that there are already more than 200,000 subnets hosting nodes of the Private Relay. And this is also a challenge for all the geo-blocking service that use the client IP address to provide some kind of blocking. Finally, private relay is interesting to study because it has some novel technical operation. It has a two-hop architecture, so the client traffic passes through two proxies, two relays, before reaching the final server. And also, private relay is the first attempt to have a QUIC-based VPN. It is implemented using QUIC, and it also implements some novel features of QUIC. Let's see a bit how private relay works. As I said, it is a multi-party relay architecture that decouples the user network identity, which is the client IP, from the internet usage of the user, which is available as in the server IP. This is accomplished having two levels of encryption and two proxies between the client and the destination server. So we have a client that establishes an encrypted tunnel to a first proxy, then another encrypted tunnel to a second proxy, and then the traffic reaches the destination server. So the first proxy, which is managed by École, knows which is the client IP address, but doesn't know which is the server IP address. The second proxy knows clearly which is the server IP address because it must have the traffic it, but doesn't know the client IP address. So privacy is enhanced because there is no proxy that at the same time knows both client and server IP. So private relay is the first attempt to have a QUIC-based VPN service. It uses two nested encryption levels, but must modify a bit QUIC to avoid some problems. So it is the first attempt to use two recent features of QUIC. The first issue to solve is that with QUIC, you would have two nested levels of reliable protocols, and this is a bad idea. The second issue is that you must extend the classical HTTP connect to work with the QUIC and UDP. The second issue has been easily solved by this new RFC that designed the extended connect for QUIC, and this is the first use of this extended connect. Now, let's go back to issue 1. As I said, having two nested instances of a reliable protocol is a bad idea because you expect long delays, frequent connection aborts is not a good idea. So the solution is to modify QUIC using this new RFC called also mask, in which you can use QUIC disabling the reliability. So you can turn off retransmissions in QUIC so that the outer QUIC connection between the client and the proxy doesn't retransmit packets, and packets are retransmitted only within the inner QUIC connection between the client and the server. In this way, there is just a single instance of reliable protocol, and you solve the issues I said before. So which is the research question of our paper? Is about performance. So we are wondering whether using private relay you experience slower throughput, or downloading file takes more time, or web pages load more slowly. To this end, we deployed a simple testbed in 3 cities, in Trieste in Italy, Lyon in France, and Honolulu in the US, using 3 macOS PCs connected to the internet using an Ethernet cable. And all 3 PCs had a paid subscription to iCloud private relay. We ran 3 sets of experiments. A first set of experiments to measure the throughput achieved using an automated version of the École speed test to measure download and upload throughput. We measured the performance of a bulk download of a large file, in this case a 1 gigabit file hosted on the Hetzner CDN, to measure the download speed. And finally, we measure the performance of web browsing by automatically visiting 100 websites, the top website for each of the 3 countries, using the Safari web browser for macOS and the browser time testing tools to automate the visits to these websites. The output of this measurement campaign was the collection of the key performance indicator called page load time, how long the page takes to load, which is measured as the time that passes between the web page request and when the last object, internal object of the web page is downloaded. And this is very useful to estimate user experience because this is known to be correlated with the user's subjective quality of experience. So let's see briefly the results of our measurements. First of all, we realized that private relay is not as fast as the native network. So here in this curve, the red lines represent the download throughput of the private relay, while the blue lines represent the throughput you achieve when using the native network. And we see that almost always private relay is lower in download than the native network. It is interesting to notice that the performance you get in download also depends on the proxy that the system chooses for you. For example, in France, when the system routes your traffic to a Cloudflare proxy, network is much slower, download throughput is much lower than when the system chooses an Akamai proxy. In the US, interestingly, it is the opposite. It's hard to find the root causes, but we limit ourselves to find the situation. In upload, the situation is similar. Private relay is lower. Again, the red curves are well separated from the blue curves. But in the US, this doesn't happen because the network, the upload link of the campus was rather slow. And so there, the uplink is the bottleneck. For bulk download, so when downloading a large file, there is no clear winner. Apparently in the US, private relay is lower, while in France, private relay is faster than using the native network. We cannot understand the root causes, potentially some routing issue. And finally, we can see the results about web browsing. Here in these curves, we see that using the private relay, page load time is slower, between 7 and 60%, depending on the web page and on the situation. But we observe that in general, web browsing is lower when using private relay, potentially for the extra encryption, from the extra distance packets have to travel, but the browsing experience is impacted. These were our results. We can conclude with some final remarks, saying that private relay moderately impacts performance, even if this is the first attempt to have a QUIC-based VPN service based on some new features of QUIC. So this is a novel architecture. And we can say that there are still some aspects to study if private relay will become very popular. There are implications on the geo-blocking systems, as I said, and also this has a cost in terms of computer resources because you have more levels of encryption. There are implications on energy because of the system consume energy. So there is still much more to do to study completely the implications of this architecture. Thank you for your attention. The live version of me is happy to answer any question.